Welcome to part 2. This flower I'm going to be sandblasting, this being the third technique in the 5 that I'm going to show you. This is my Coral Draw program, exactly the same artwork, and all I'm going to do is print it out in very strong black on a special transparency. When I say special, it's one that doesn't smudge. It's a wonderfully strong absorbent transparency, takes the black ink, and here I have got it in a light cabinet. That is a ultraviolet light cabinet. You can see the bulbs going across the top. Those will turn on once I have closed it and got it nice and secure. I have placed the artwork on top of a piece of APM Plus Ultra Pro photoresist film, which is very light sensitive, so I will be closing the box very, very quickly because it will harden with the light. The areas that have the black on, the light will not pass through, and therefore the film will remain soft and will be easily washed out with water, a blast of water, which you can see me doing here. Once the image is all washed out, then I dry it and it becomes a sticky mask. Really sticky on the one side, which is fabulous, and you can then stick it onto the glass. I mark the glass once again using my tatty little piece of paper I've had for years with my circles on and very useful divisions. And in this case, as you know, I'm using 5. I also have my horizontal line, so all my flowers are roughly the same height, and I've stuck the sticker in place. There's a piece of film on the top, so I remove that, and this will leave a slightly more vulnerable flower. In the clear area, there is still a tiny bit of very fine film, which is holding it all together, basically. And it's a good idea to get rid of all the air so that your sandblast doesn't suddenly lift a whole area up, including the sticker behind it, and then you end up with a nasty bloom where the sandblast smudges through the edges. Don't want that. So we make sure that it is nice and aerated. And for that, I've got this rather fancy gadget that puts lots and lots of holes in it. Of course, I just roll it over there quickly, and that makes sure that all the air is out. And just to be doubly sure, I roll it. It's like a stencil roller, which looks a little bit grubby. So now I'm satisfied that it is nice and smooth. I stick some more tape around the exposed areas of the glass. Into the sandblaster it goes, and holding the gun at right angles, blast away for as long as you want depth. The glass is quite thick, so I can go relatively deep. There you can see that the blasted sticker comes off, just wipes off very, very easily. So I go and wash it off with warm water, and there you have a lovely sandblasted flower. My next technique is etching with hydrofluoric acid paste. Using the same artwork, I'm exporting it as a PNG, and this I will send to my vinyl cutter. I have a Cricut Maker 3, and I use their dedicated application on my PC. I can do all sorts with it in this program. You can see that it is the outlines I want to send to the cutter, and this is basically what I'm going to be able to remove from the vinyl that I'm going to use. It'll be cut, and then I can weed it out. The program on the PC is now showing the position on the vinyl where my little flower is going to be cut. So you can use quite a small piece of vinyl, scrap really, in order to create these little stickers. Now there's a tiny weeny little tangential blade that's spinning around and cutting out the shape ever so efficiently. It's so clever, I love it. And the rollers are rolling the vinyl up and down. It's on a sort of a sticky background so that it can keep in place. And it very efficiently cuts it out. There we go. Process done. You can see how it's cut through the vinyl, but in actual fact it has not cut through the backing. So it just cuts the vinyl. And you can see with a very sharp craft knife I can very, very easily remove the bits that I'm going to be acid etching. Could just as easily have used exactly this sticker to do the sandblasting. But in general I use APM because most of my work requires a lot more detail. Of course, if you remove the background you can sandblast or etch a reverse image. You could of course also get the scrap vinyl and use a craft knife and hand cut your flower, your lettering or whatever. So now I place some what we call lifting tape on the top, and that just keeps it all in place as I remove the sticker from the backing. And here you can see I'm doing just that. And then I will put it straight onto the glass with everything in position as per the other processes. I pop it in position and make sure that it is all lying nice and flat and sticking down nicely without bubbles, and then I can remove the lifting tape. You can reuse this lifting tape, so pop it back on the carrying paper and use it the next time. I've had quite a few uses out of some of the lifting tape. It's not cheap, so might as well reuse it. It's important to put tape around the rest of the glass because you can get what's called a bloom, and that is the fumes from the acid paste. This is extremely old acid etching paste that I have had, my goodness, 25 years, and I'm not joking, honestly. So don't ask me where it came from because that source no longer supplies, but you can look online and find acid etching paste. It's a hydrofluoric acid paste. It's much safer to use. It is safer than the actual liquid, but don't have it near pets or children. And don't have any open sores because you will go through the roof. It's acid at the end of the day. And you're going to slowly and carefully put it over the exposed area of the glass. Now, if you have a little makeup spatula handy, they are really, really good for that. Little flat top. Whereas all I had to hand, as I don't do this very often at all, I have the back of the paintbrush. And I just slowly spread it over. You can use a paintbrush itself if you like. But I just found it's easy to splodge it on. Move it around to make sure there's no bubbles. You can look through from the other side of the glass and see if there are any bubbles. And once you have got that far, then you can let it sit for a minute or two, depending, I suppose, on how old your acid is. And I find after all these years, this acid still works fine. I mean, I might find that if I bought an acid in this day and age that it is much stronger. I'm not really sure, but it's not something I use very often. I have used it occasionally for things like clouds, water, that sort of thing. But I'm not fond of the fact that it is actually quite a dangerous substance. Oh, and make sure you are wearing some goggles or glasses because you don't want the fumes going up into your eyes. I mean, yes, you've got to take precautions. It's not like you can feel it burning your eyeballs or anything, but these fumes are dangerous enough that if you don't put masking tape around the glass, just the vapor just floating about will make that mark on the clear glass. So after a couple of minutes, very carefully scrape it off, because guess what? You can put it back in the bottle and reuse it, like I have done. I don't know how many glasses I have used this particular bit of paste for over the many, many years. I bought this paste when I was in Zimbabwe in the last century. That's how old it is. Then all you have to do next is get to some water and give it a good clean. Remove the sticker, and this is the result. It is so smooth that when you run your finger over it, you actually cannot feel anything. It just feels like the glass. If you hear about glass that has been etched, quite often it has been done in a bath full of actual acid juice, if you like, not the paste. The paste is more for hobbies. Moving on to my fifth and the last technique I'm going to be showing you in these two videos, and that is diamond point. Now, diamond point, or in fact, as you see in the fourth gadget, it is a tungsten carbide point. So the first two items are basic clutch pencils, and they open up and grab a 2.35 millimeter shaft burr. And of course I've just used normal burrs as I use in my drill. They are diamond grit, of course, as opposed to an actual point. So this is very easy for beginners, quite cheap, relatively cheap in fact. I do sell them myself, and I have scrap glass in my showroom, and I get my customers to have a scratch, and they experience a tiny bit of glass engraving for the first time in their lives, and they find it quite exciting, just as I did the first time I had a go back in 1983. The third one is a tiny industrial diamond, which is embedded in a hard metal. This is a much more expensive item. There is one called a Lancer. Don't think this is it. It is actually very, very old. But you basically turn it until you find the sharpest edge of it. This is best for stipple engraving, which is literally ... on the glass. As I mentioned earlier, the fourth one is in fact a tungsten carbide, and that does fit into a special holder, and goodness only knows where it is. This is really old and I've no idea what it belongs to. So the holder is somewhere between Africa and here, like so many of my belongings. It's quite intriguing. I wonder where it is. So I've got this very same artwork I used for the drill engraving, and I need to put it onto the glass just as I did with the previous one. But this time, instead of using the carbon, I'm going to show you another way to do it, and that is to run your soft white Sharpie or red waxy pencil, sometimes they work, run it over the back like its own carbon, then turn it over, tape it on in place as we've been doing all along, and use something to trace it. Now, it was suggested to me by one of my patrons the other day, and Vasil, thank you Vasil, to use a pencil, a hard pencil. But to be perfectly honest, I still prefer my dotting pen. So if you have a dotting pen or a ballpoint pen, I find it is, especially with this sort of transfer, you need something really hard, really, really hard. And so I used my dotting pen to transfer onto the glass. And as you can see, it's a little bit messy, but it's there. You can basically see what's going on. You can always go over it again with a black permanent marker or something like that, or just go over it again with your white Sharpie, just to make it stand out a little bit more if you like. I still find the carbon paper, the black carbon paper, to be by far the best method of transferring onto the glass. So to avoid too much reflection, I don't want to be able to see all the other images, I have just shoved a bit of black velvet base into the glass. Of course, I've got my nice light going on in the background, above and behind, and that will show it up really nicely. I'm going to start with the small diamond burr, so the diamond grit all over, and just roughly draw some outlines. I'm going to be swapping and changing between those three items, the three diamond points, and trying different things with them. This is not, of course, what I do very often, but it is what I teach absolute beginners who don't have a drill and do want to be able to create little gifts. There's a lot you can do with this. Here I'm going to have a little go with the actual diamond point, the industrial diamond point. You can see I'm super keen to try this, and I hope I get my fingers out the way in a moment. Oh, please, I hope I do. I am actually trying a bit of stipple engraving. So it is literally tapping the glass, and as you can see, it is producing the tiniest little dots. Now this glass is not lead crystal, so it is not very soft, and I would advise that if you're going to do this sort of thing, that crystal is by far the easiest to work on. I'm only going to show one petal in this method because it is obviously very time consuming. I am absolutely not an expert at it. I just about never do it. I have only engraved one glass of my son's using this technique. There are engravers out there who use this method, certainly not many. There's some magnificent work. Of course, it is a shaded work. You're going to create the most amazing shading, and you can get very incredible features, people's faces. However, I do need to eat. As you can see, if you compare the time-wise, this sort of engraving with a drill, yeah, I do need to eat and pay my bills. I'm just showing you one petal just so that you know what can be done and what has been done and is done with a diamond point, the more traditional effect. Now I'm just going to use it to outline the other petals very badly. I'm still getting the feel of it, to be honest. And once you find the sharp edge, you can see how very easily it cuts the glass. So basically, if you search diamond lancer on the internet, you should be able to find this sort of thing. As I say, it's an industrial diamond which is embedded in some sort of hard metal. Don't ask me, I've no idea. It just is an industrial diamond, and basically at right angles, and sometimes you can get one that is at an angle so that you don't have to engrave at 90 degrees. As I say, I'm not really au fait with this particular engraving tool. As I say, mine is so very old. Also from way back in Zimbabwe, last century. So yeah, so it's pretty ancient. This might have been the Lancer that was available then. Okay, so having just about finished outlining, I can easily clean off the waxy pen and get filling in. So using the medium-ish size diamond burr, ball burr, so there's grit all the way around it, I'm scratching away merrily. It's literally scratch, scrub, crosshatch, you name it, do whatever you fancy. It's basically to whiten up the area, to scratch up the surface as much as you can, or as much as you want. Of course, if you leave bits of clear glass, that can be your shading effect. But as you know, this whole glass, I'm not focusing on shading. I am just comparing the flat engraving of the different techniques. So I will be engraving this flower pretty much as white as possible, just a black and white flower. The only half-tone bit, of course, is the bit of stipple engraving, showing a bit of shading there. It's a little bit tricky creating rounded curves with this ball type burr, but you soon get used to it if you're doing this quite a lot. Right, I have picked up the diamond point and just seeing what it does, but actually I'd rather not waste it on this sort of thing. But there's a typical crosshatch if you wanted a different effect. I suppose it would be good for that, stippling and crosshatching. But if you want to fill in an area, really you are going to be wanting to use these normal diamond ball burrs. You can start by cross-hatching and then scribbling like this to fill in an area. You break the surface of the glass first with the cross-hatching and then just scratch it all together. Of course, do wear glasses and a mask. I really do advise that. Just because you are producing some dust, as you can see, there's dust coming off, and not quite as much, well, not anywhere near as much as the drill would produce. But the last thing you want is a little bit of dust flying up into your eyes. So just wear glasses or goggles at least, and a mask. When I used to teach in the little village of Darsham on the craft experience days many years ago, that was the most incredible sound when you've got a table of 7 or so people scratching away and chatting away merrily and really, really enjoying themselves. They didn't even think about the noise it was making. So there you go. As I said at the beginning, each one of these techniques have got so many other variations of what to do with them. It's incredible. There's just so much you can do. Anyway, let's get our white tack and have a look. This is the acid etching. absolutely nothing. I mean, when you run your finger over it, you cannot feel any difference between the actual clear glass and the etching. So now this is the diamond point, and it shows up quite nicely. I must admit the glass is nice and bright, but as you can see, it's certainly not deep. There's a tiny weeny bit of texture on there, but it's very much surface engraving. So you can do that on fairly thin glass. And of course here is the sandblasting, which for a very basic shape is by far my favorite. If we're not doing shading, I mean, you can shade to a certain degree, but if it's straightforward black and white, sandblasting, absolutely, that is my favorite for the subject. Yeah, so that was the laser, that was the hand engraving. Obviously no shading at all. That I had to restrain myself. And the sandblasting there, I went pretty deep with that. I like to go deep. I like to be able to see a shade from the light coming from the side, and that's the acid etching. Very, very useful for the sky, the water, clouds, that sort of thing. If you ever do scenery to that extent. I don't often, as I say, hardly ever use that. And the diamond point with a little bit of stipple, just so that you can see one of the other techniques you can use with a diamond point. As always, a bunch of flowers kept in an odd number means that you will not see one in front of the other at any time. So that's rather useful to remember if you're going to decorate a whole glass, going all the way around the glass. Keep to an odd number because it is much more effective. Hope you enjoyed that, guys. Happy engraving. See you next time. Bye for now.